We are here today to talk with you about the unjust detention of Will Tae Heung Kim. To give a little background, NAKASEC is a national organization that was founded in 1994 by our grassroots affiliates and organizes Korean and Asian Americans towards racial, social, and economic justice with a focus on humane immigration systems. In January of this year, NAKASEC revived our 24/7 emergency hotline, which is offered in English and Korean. On Monday, July 21st, we received a call from Will's family member informing us that he'd been arrested by CBP at San Francisco Airport on his way back from his brother's wedding in Korea. We are demanding that Will be released immediately. Today, we'll hear from Will's mom and members of his legal team. There will be time for questions and answers at the end. Please drop your questions in the chat where our team will be able to compile them. There'll be an opportunity to come off mute and ask live questions as well. We ask that you please introduce yourself and the outlet you represent before asking a question. And again, this press conference is recorded only by NAKASEC and can be shared, and we ask that you do not record. We thank you for your work in reporting this alarming and disturbing situation. As the Trump administration continues to attack immigrants and anyone who disagrees with them, and as private prison executives profit off the incarceration of millions of people, the power and freedom of the press and the people is more important than ever to raise awareness, educate the public, and call out what is right and should not be normalized. You are critical in the fight to protect the freedoms and rights for every person, citizen and non-citizen alike, per our U.S. Constitution. Will's mom, Sharon, is calling in and will now speak. Our team will interpret for her. Please put any questions in the chat and we will share them with her for the Q&A portion. Okay, so I'll turn it over to Sharon with her interpreter.
상황이 어떤지 한번 말씀을 해주시고 그 다음에 어머니가 이 사태에 대해서 어떻게 느끼시는지 한 번만 말씀을 같이 공유해 주시겠습니까?
예, 저는 진짜 이 협회가 없었으면 제가 아무도 의지할 곳도 없는데 이렇게 도와주시고 우리 아들을 위해서 이렇게 여러모로 발벗고 나서서 해주시니 진짜 가족보다도 더 소중하고 진짜 너무 감사해요.
아드님이 갇히신 것에 대해서는 또 어떤 감정이신지 좀 공유해 주시죠.
우리 아들 갇힌 거에 대해서는 진짜 하늘이 무너지고 땅이 꺼지는 것 같은 기분이에요. 저 어떻게 할 수가 없어요. 제가 지금 며칠 동안 밥이 안 넘어가요. 그 정도로 제 심정이 진짜 지금 아주 그냥 무너지고 진짜 너무 가슴이 아파요.
In regard to what happened to Sharon's son, Will, when she first heard it, it was her world was sharing, and she never really expects this to happen to her own son, who is a legal permanent resident, who is a good son, and she doesn't understand why this has to happen to her son.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing, Sharon, and taking the time to speak with us today. We can't imagine how difficult and stressful this is for you and your family, and we really appreciate your courage and sharing with us today. We at NAKASEC, like many other immigrant communities, are intimately familiar with the harm of authoritarianism. Many of our founders and community members are survivors of South Korean dictators after the Korean War, and we have persisted with strong values of democracy, freedom, and basic human rights. Today, we are witnessing the United States slide quickly towards authoritarianism, and immigrants are the first litmus test for whether Americans will allow this. From mobilizing the military against protesters in Los Angeles to attacks on students, scientists like Will, and universities to the witch hunts of individuals and the scapegoating of immigrants for all of the country's problems. The Trump administration wants to see how far they can go before we say no as a people. This is America. We are supposed to be a democracy. We have rights to due process, to legal counsel. This is not happening right now. Will Kim, who, by the way, is a legal permanent resident, was not able to seek legal counsel or directly communicate with anyone for over a week and was detained for a week at an airport. This is simply outrageous. Can any of us imagine if one of our own children or loved ones was coming home from a trip and suddenly disappeared in an airport and there was no way to contact them? It's up to us, the people who have been an integral part of building the United States and for whom the U.S. is home, to see clearly and act swiftly. Since January, our hotline has received a significant volume of calls and they continue to grow. Our mobile app has been downloaded over 28,000 times, signaling the deep fear and uncertainty of communities across the country. From the Chinese Exclusion Act to today, Asian and other immigrants have been the targets of anti-immigration attacks. While immigration is mostly associated with the Latinx community, all immigrants are impacted by the attacks on the immigrant community, also including Asian, Black, and other races and ethnicities. Asian Americans are the only racial group that is still majority immigrant, 67% of adults and 54% of our population overall. Of course, the ramping up of the disappearing of community members and all of the anti-immigrant legislation at the state and federal levels are harming our community. Before we move to hear from Will's lawyers, I want to quickly share some resources for our communities affected by Trump's anti-immigrant policies. First, NAKASEC's hotline is monitored 24/7 in English and Korean, and if Spanish speakers call, they can be directly connected to another hotline. Our hotline can be reached at 1-844-500-3222. We also have a free mobile app available for Apple and Android phones. We recommend everyone downloads it. The app provides information about your constitutionally protected rights in over 21 languages, recommendations on building an emergency plan. It can read your rights aloud to a law enforcement officer or ICE in English, and it can send an emergency text to a predetermined emergency contact. We will share the links to the app in the chat and also the hotline number. Now we'll hear from Will's legal team. I'll turn it over to them.
Hello, everybody. My name is Eric Lee. I'm a partner at Lee and Godshall Bennett LLP, and I'll be speaking briefly and then handing it over to Carl Kruth, the family's immigration lawyer. Beginning midweek last week, I began emailing Customs and Border Protection contacts to attempt to locate Will, to ascertain why he was being detained, and to demand that he be given the right to a phone call with his counsel. I did not receive a response for several days, and finally, on Saturday, after Will had been detained by that point since the prior Monday, I was finally able to speak to a supervising officer at CBP. The officer, using an extremely hostile tone, told me that he would not allow me to speak to my client. I informed the officer that Will had lived in the United States for 35 years, that he was a lawful permanent resident, and that he had only been outside the United States for 2 weeks on a vacation. The officer said he did not care. I asked the officer whether the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution applied to Will. The officer gave me a one-word answer: no. It wasn't until Kim Bellware's article in the Washington Post, which led to congressional involvement, that our team was finally able to meet with Will, and Carl can share some of the details that he learned about the terrible conditions of confinement that Will suffered through for 7 days at SFO. A critical democratic principle is at stake in this case. It goes far beyond Will and his family, as important as they are. The Constitution applies to the people, not to citizens alone, who are the Bill of Rights refers only to the people, in fact. And non-citizens with the type of connections to this country that Will has are considered a part of the people. Even the Supreme Court has acknowledged this. And the protections of the Bill of Rights do not simply wash away like watercolor when a green card holder briefly leaves the United States and returns. The manner in which Customs and Border Protection held Will incommunicado for over a week and denied him his most basic rights as a member of the people of this country should shock us, not only because of Will's absolutely critical research work trying to find a vaccine for Lyme disease, or because of his 35 years of residency, but because it tells us something deeply concerning about the attitude of this administration to the Constitution, which Trump, after all, attempted to overthrow on January 6th, 2021, and which he later said he planned to terminate. Now we are seeing what that looks like. One final point. Leadership at the Department of Homeland Security and the Trump administration have consistently denounced journalists, lawyers, and activists for comparing ICE and Customs and Border Patrol protection to the Gestapo. Well, this case highlights the fact that the comparison is unfortunately quite apt. There's another dark historical connection. For decades, the United States government in San Francisco, on Angel Island, and elsewhere exercised a policy of depriving Asian immigrants and Asian American citizens of their most basic democratic rights while coming into the United States. This is another unfortunately, this dark historical period is being washed up again by this administration, and this case exemplifies it as well. So, because there has been no serious opposition to any of this from within the political establishment, the Democratic Party has been totally silent and has refused to do anything to oppose Trump's attack on immigrants. Our appeal is to you, the population of the United States. We think that is the people of this country have to stand up and take mass action to defend the most basic democratic rights and to stop the descent to dictatorship.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me. My name is Carl Kruth. I'm representing Mr. Kim in immigration court proceedings as soon as they commence. And I'm here to talk to you a little bit about how the system is supposed to work. I will eventually get to the detention conditions and concerns. Most of what I'm going to be talking about is procedural posture. That's all I've been authorized to talk about by Mr. Kim, those two topics. So, Mr. Kim arrived at San Francisco International. I was not aware, but he arrived at 6:30 a.m. A week and a half ago at SFO, and he was held for longer than a week in the airport, which, by the way, is not a detention facility. He was moved within what's called secondary inspection, at least twice per day, from one area where there were no windows, which is where he was held during the day, and then he was in a space where there were windows at night, but he had no natural light at any time because of the times of his movement. I will get into the rest of the detention conditions in a little while. What should have happened in retrospect and in light of my practice, which has been 25 years in the making, is that he should have been deferred for inspection, which is a tertiary form of inspection. So primary inspection is when a applicant for admission shows their passport and presents themselves for admission. When someone is deemed by the primary inspection officer to be subject to further scrutiny, they're sent to what's called secondary inspection. And that's what happened to Mr. Kim. Normally, that secondary inspection would be brief. And if there was a need for further scrutiny beyond that, it would be in the context of movement to deferred inspection. If someone needed to be deferred, they would normally be deferred to the location of their destination as part of their itinerary. From what we know, Mr. Kim's itinerary showed that he was to land eventually on a connecting flight to Houston. So the appropriate path would have been to defer his inspection to Houston, where there is a deferred inspection unit. That did not happen. Instead, he was housed for a prolonged period at SFO, and as Eric described, he was not provided with the opportunity to speak with counsel, and he also had very brief opportunity opportunity to speak with any family member. One in particular was granted permission to speak to him for a very short window of time. He was, according to reports, given his cell phone to a CBP officer who indicated some reports to family member on text message. That is the extent of it. I did speak with a Customs and Border Protection supervisor after having sent a notice of entry of appearance to that officer through a fax line, and experienced much the same as Eric Lee did in his dialogue with the Customs and Border Protection supervisor. I did want to speak briefly on how the system is supposed to work and why what happened shows that the system is broken. Specifically, he did not get due process at Customs and Border Protection. Due process is a guarantee that foreign nationals gain by virtue of immigration court proceedings. And that has been articulated in many court decisions in every circuit court of the federal system. So there is no doubt that he deserved due process and did not get any at Customs and Border Protection. Again, just like the airport is not a detention facility, the airport is not an immigration courtroom, and Customs and Border Protection officers are interrogators. They are not neutral arbiters. So the idea of getting due process was deprived of him, and the path that was supposed to be the one for him to travel was for him to gain the foothold that Immigration and Nationality Act Section 101A13C provides. Specifically, because of his status as a lawful permanent resident of the United States for 35 years, he had the entitlement that the government owed the burden of proof to show that he was not a returning lawful permanent resident of the United States. In other words, the government is deeming him to be an arriving alien, much like someone with a visa arriving at this land that we call the United States of America. And instead, he was treated, as I said, as an arriving alien rather than a lawful permanent resident, with the entitlement under 101A13C of the Immigration and Nationality Act to the presumption that places the burden of proof on the government to show that he's not an arriving alien. So, with all that said, I do want to get into the conditions of his confinement while he was at SFO. He was subject to the lights being on 24 hours a day. As I said earlier, there were no windows. There was no natural light at any time. His opportunities for things like exercise or fresh air were completely deprived of him. He was confined to a chair for sleeping. He only had access to concession food. He only had access to water, no other fluids. And he could not have full nights of sleep. When I talked to the Customs and Border Protection officer who was claiming to be a supervisor, they indicated to me that he was fed and he was taken care of. Those are quotes. That's all they would tell me. And eventually they hung up on me when I was being quite cordial and diplomatic, simply asking for their name so that I could identify them for purposes of litigation and representation before the immigration court. So that gives you a little bit of a picture. Again, I've only been authorized by Mr. Kim to talk about detention conditions and procedural posture. So please keep your questions to those two topics. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eric and Carl, and thank you for all of that thorough information. So we're now going to go into the Q&A section. There have been a number of questions that were put in the chat, so we'll go through those first. Hopefully we can get through them. There are quite a few. And then after that, we can open it up if there are any questions folks still need to ask. The first question is for Ms. Sharon Lee. And so Youngwoon, if you could please interpret for her. This is from the Korean Phila Times. Can you share how you first learned that Tae Heung was taken into custody by CBP? How and when was your family notified of what happened? And since then, has the government provided you any official explanation or updates about his whereabouts or condition?
네, 처음 아는 거는 저희 작은 아들이 얘기해줘서 형아가 지금 이민국 오피스에 들어가 있는데 엄마 연락이 없어요. 그들이 그러니까 월요일 날인가 여기서 월요일 날 서울에서 갔으니까 그 화요일 날 거기서 오피스 들어가고 엄마 연락이 없어 그러는 거예요. 그러고 나서 연락을 못 들었어요. 그리고 그쪽에서 아무런 연락이 없었어요. 저는 받은 적도 없고 우리 작은애도 받은 적도 없어요.
Miss Lee said that Will left Korea on Monday, local time, and supposed to arrive on Tuesday morning. And she has not heard from Will for the entire day. So she was a little concerned, but then her other son eventually called Sharon to let her know that he got a call from CBP that Will is detained. But other than that, they have not had an official communication from CBP of the reason why my son is detained. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The next question is for Carl. Can you share with us what the current status of Mr. Kim is and where he is right now?
Thank you for the question. I can tell you that there are reports that he's being housed at a detention facility in Arizona, and I have not had communication with him since he arrived there. I did meet with him at a transition point between his housing at Customs and Border Protection, change of location to ICE detention.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, what is Will's area of academic study and what degree is he pursuing? Will has been studying, getting a PhD in infectious disease at Texas A&M University, where he has been doing groundbreaking work towards a vaccine for Lyme disease. So that's the answer. And then the next question is, has there been any update on whether NAKASEC's outreach to lawmakers representing Will's district has led any movement towards his release? And so, Youngwoon, could you please share about that, what we've been hearing from his member of Congress and also from Texas A&M University as well?
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Young-han. I'm an organizing director here at NAKASEC. After we heard about Will's case, we have reached out to 2 U.S. senators in California, as well as Nancy Pelosi, whose district covers San Francisco. 2 U.S. California senators have been helpful in contacting the CBP and updating Will's status. We also have been in conversation with Michael McCall's office, who covers Will's residence in Texas 10th District. We have given the office the basic information so that they can investigate. We have not really heard anything back yet, but the conversation is ongoing. We have also inquired 2 Korean American Congress people, including Representative Young Kim and then Senator Andy Kim. And their effort is ongoing, but hasn't seen any significant movement from it. yet.
Okay, and any news from Texas A&M University?
Briefly, I would suggest that those questions be directed towards Texas A&M itself. Beyond that, I'm not in a position to comment.
Okay, thank you. The next question is for the consulate, the Korean consulate. What necessary actions is the Korean consulate in San Francisco taking regarding this case? How many times have the mother, family members, and lawyer spoken with Mr. Kim? The Korean consulate could please answer this question. Is the consulate still on the call? I think the consulate might have left the call, and so please contact the Korean consulate in San Francisco with that question. Sorry about that. So this is for Carl again. When you say there have been reports of Will being held at an Arizona detention facility, what reports are you referring to? Is this a report from ICE?
I'm not at liberty to say, sorry.
Okay. Then also, Carl, as far as we know, Will Kim has been detained over a 2011 event. Has CBP or ICE mentioned any other reason for his detention?
I'm unaware of any other reason for his detention. Certainly a 2-week trip abroad to attend a family member's wedding is not cause for any claim of abandonment of his lawful permanent residency, which is one of the few alternative reasons that they might engage in, say, detention of an individual or other deferral that might lead to, say, parole into the United States. And that is a process by which they do temporarily deprive the individual of their green card if there's an allegation of abandonment, but there's no presumption of abandonment until 6 months abroad without having previously gotten an I-131 for previous travel abroad for a lengthy period.
Okay. Please stay with me, Carl. The next few questions are for you as well. So we've heard that Mr. Kim suffers from asthma. Do you know if he's receiving the appropriate medical treatment? And then also, despite the internal regulations of U.S. Custom and Border Protection limiting detention to a maximum of 72 hours, why was he held for a prolonged period beyond that limit? Sorry, they're kind of two different questions.
No, that's fine. Thank you for the questions. As to the first concern about whether his health needs were attended to, that sort of goes back to what I addressed earlier. There are no standards or protocols at the airport for detention. In other words, there's no detention standards. That's why we do not favor detentions in an airport. It sort of like goes back to that notion that some comedy movies have been based on, that people don't live in airports. They don't live in transit facilities. We don't house people in transit facilities because we don't have any objective criteria to ensure that their health needs are taken care of, that they get adequate outdoor opportunities, that they get fresh air, that they get healthy food. And this goes to your question because we don't know whether his medical care was provided for. At the time that I met with him in person, he was in a transit facility. He had certainly not had those precautions taken with regard to his health needs. I have not had the opportunity to gain a picture on his health care since he landed at his current confinement. As to the second question, can you repeat it one more time for me, please?
Sure. CBP is supposed to have internal regulations that limit detention to a maximum of 72 hours. Why was he held beyond that limit?
Hmm.
What
I
was
can
the justification?
speculate,
Uh-huh.
but I can't tell you with any degree of certainty. I've seen shorter periods of time, because even the 72 hours in all the years I've been practicing, I've never seen anyone held that long, and I've represented a huge number of lawful permanent residents who have encountered secondary inspection at San Francisco International Airport. So, sort of a prolonged detention indicates to me that there is a degree of coercion or inducement afoot, and specifically in this context, I would speculate that they were trying to coerce him into withdrawing his application for admission.
Okay, that's terrible. Yeah, we've been hearing some reports of that happening to people, especially at the airport. Okay, the next question is for Sharon. So, Youngwon, if you could please translate. The question is, what do you want the public to know about your son, and what do you hope will be the outcome of the situation?
저는 지금 제가 엄마로서 제일 급한 거는 우리 태영이가 저 학교를 지금 다 마치지도 않고 나와서 빨리 나와서 지금 하던 공부를 다 마치고 자기가 또 하고자 하는 사회에 나와서 자기가 어려운 사람도 도와줄 수 있는 그런 아들이 되고 싶고, 그런 엄마의 바람이에요. 그리고 걔도 또 그렇게 원하고 학교를 일단은 마쳐야 되는 건데, 지금 얼마 남지도 않았는데, 나와서 빨리 학교 수업에 들어가서 학교도 마쳤으면 좋겠고.
Sharon said that she, of course, hopes that her son will get out immediately. And she was emphasizing that, Will was in process of getting his PhD. So she hopes that he comes out immediately and then goes back to his study, where, he can do greater things for other folks, studying for vaccine against Lyme disease. And yeah, she hopes that he can go back to his normal life that he deserves.
That's right. Thank you. The last question before we just kind of open it up is for Carl. So I think you mentioned that you have not been able to speak with Mr. Kim since he has been transferred to the Arizona Detention Center. Is he now being held incommunicado? Will you be able to communicate with him? And then have you ever seen another case like this where a Korean national was detained and arrested without cause?
Of course, opportunities will be made available, and this is sort of consistent with detention standards, that opportunities will be made available for communication with counsel. It's what he suffered at the airport, that was confinement without access to counsel. So yes, the opportunities will be made available should he choose to avail himself of them. I cannot contact him directly without visiting the detention facility in person. In most circumstances, it's sort of outbound calls. And then secondly, of course, we've seen South Koreans housed for extended periods of time, what we call prolonged detention, by Immigration and Customs Enforcement in many instances and over many administrations. So this sort of notion of ICE detention, or previously INS detention, does not depart from sort of historical criteria. What is afoot in this case that is so incredibly devastating for not just the South Korean population, but every population of foreign nationals with green cards who live and contribute to American society, is that he suffered this prolonged detention at Customs and Border Protection. I mean, to be housed there for a week without adequate considerations for his health, for his access to daylight and outdoor activities, physical exercise. Without a bed, he had to sleep in a chair. These are deprivations that would never occur in an ICE facility. And I do not mean to in any way encourage the notion that ICE detention standards are consistent with a healthy lifestyle, but they're better than what his confinement in Customs and Border Protection for that prolonged duration provided him with. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So now we're gonna just open it up to questions. So if you have a question, if you could please raise your hand through the Zoom, and then when we call on you, if you could state your name, what media outlet you're associated with, and then please ask your question, who you would like to ask the question of. Nicole Cheng.
Yes, I'm from ACOM, American Community Media. I have a question to Sharon Lee. I was wondering if he was alone to come into the United States when he was coming to San Francisco. And then is he also, Sharon Lee said, brother got a call from Mr. Kim, but his brother also live in the United States. The other question to Becky is, what's your next plan? Is there any campaign ongoing, or you're planning to meet other Congress or representative to awareness of this case and also the immigration issue? Thank you.
Youngwon, did you hear the first question?
Yeah, due to the nature of the question and the legal case that's ongoing, and then also the privacy issue, I won't be able to answer the question.
Okay, thank you. Well, to your second question, we will continue to organize and advocate for Will Kim's immediate release. NAKASEC is a network of affiliate organizations. Actually, a couple of our affiliate executive directors are on this Zoom. John Park from Mingwan Center, Sugyung-oh from Hamke Center, Danae Kovac was here from Hana Center. We all work together to spread awareness about what is happening with our community members, and we also work in strong partnership with other organizations across the country and other advocates. You all, as the media, are playing a key role in raising attention and awareness of this case, so the larger public is aware. Our goal is for everybody to know what's happening to Will Kim. Will Kim, of course, we want him to be released, but he's also representative of many people who are being disappeared by CBP and ICE. And so, his case can symbolize a larger call for this to stop. So we will continue to advocate to members of Congress and also other elected officials to reach out to other decision makers that can help his release happen, and of course also work with his legal team to make sure that the legal process is also happening as it should. So thank you. Are there other questions?
Hi, I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm Donnie with KBTX News in Bryan, College Station. My question is for Mr. Eric Lee. What is the most important thing that you want Texans to know about this situation, as well as the community that surrounds the university that he has given so much to?
Two things. Number one, Texas is presently suffering from devastating floods. Thousands and thousands of Texans of all races and nationalities have their livelihoods and their lives at risk as a result of this. The Department of Homeland Security, instead of providing absolutely necessary resources to help Texans who are going through this devastating situation, is directing an immense amount of resources away from FEMA, away from helping people deal with natural disasters, towards locking up, flying people like Will around the country, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to punish this individual who is trying to engage in research that will save the lives of people in Texas and all over with providing a vaccine for Lyme disease. So this is an opportunity for Texans, whether they voted for Donald Trump in the last election or not, to understand that the anti-immigration crackdown that this administration is launching is based on a lie. The goal was never to make America safer. The goal was never to make America healthier. The goal was to create the infrastructure for an attack on the rights of everybody, citizen and non-citizen alike. And that's why this case is so important.
All right. Thanks, Eric. Sarah Rabvani, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, thank you so much. I'm from the San Francisco Chronicle. Mr. Kruth mentioned that he's represented a number of lawful permanent residents that have encountered CBP at secondary inspection at SFO. I was wondering if you could talk about just how common or uncommon it is that immigration authorities use old misdemeanor charges, like the one that Will has, to detain and deport permanent residents.
Hi, thank you for your question, Sarah. It's quite common for them to go through a procedural process for initiating removal proceedings against lawful permanent residents with old misdemeanor convictions. What's not common is the way that they did it in Mr. Kim's case. So I don't want to go to great length in describing, the frequency with which I see it in other people's cases. But the two acts that Bill Clinton signed in 1996, which are abbreviated as IRA and EDPA, had devastating implications for foreign nationals, and those circumstances continue to haunt the population of lawful permanent residents in our communities. The Controlled Substances Act was incorporated much earlier than the 1996, so specifically with regard to offenses like the accusations and allegations contend in the notice to appear that has been supposedly presented to Mr. Kim, though we have yet to see whether it's actually been filed with the Immigration Court. That, again, was already on the books. The Immigration and Nationality Act had already incorporated that before the IRA and EDPA statutes were passed by Congress in 1996 and signed by President Clinton. I don't know if that addresses it fully, so feel free to ask follow-up questions.
That helps. Thank you.
Okay, Elsie Shin, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, thank you. This is Elsie from Korean Flood Times, and I was wondering if Mr. Kim's 2011 charge for marijuana possession filed before or after he obtained his green card, and also could you tell me more about how serious was it?
So that's an issue that is going to be subject to extensive dispute before the Immigration Court. So I'm not at liberty to say. I apologize, Elsie.
It's okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you all so much for attending our press conference. We will, as we mentioned, continue to work every day towards the release of Will Kim and towards other community members who are being wrongfully detained and deported. We thank you so much for coming and making sure that the public is aware of what is happening so that people can join us in stopping these practices that are completely violating everyone's constitutional rights, and we cannot allow to continue, or they'll continue to violate our constitutional rights. If you have any other questions or any follow-up, please feel free to reach out to us. You can reach out to our communications director. Her email is Rachel, Rachel, @nakasec.org. And we also really thank the attorneys for joining the call and taking, we know they're very busy these days and taking their time to share this important information with all of us. And also our deepest thanks to Ms. Sharon Lee for sharing with us, even though she must be going through so much.
Becky,
Yes.
can I relate a message from Sharon?
Of course.
Sharon wants to request for Korean media to please not use the photo of the family. She's been getting a lot of calls from worried relatives and family, and she didn't want that to go on. So her request is that when it's reported that her family photo to be disregarded, especially if it's being circulated in Korean media.
Okay, thank you. Yes, so please do not include the family photo. I mean, as you must imagine, the family's already going through a lot, so let's respect their wishes and their privacy. All right, everyone, thank you so much for joining, and we hope you'll continue to be with us as we work on this fight. Thank you.